Picture this. Special forces, desert warfare, elite soldiers on long-range patrols, deep, deep behind enemy lines. The vehicle they choose for this deadly work? A stripped-down, heavily armed Land Rover. And it's painted, well, you saw the title. So, what on earth is the story behind this absolutely bizarre war machine? Let's get into it.
Right? It's the one question that just seems to defy all military logic. Why would some of the toughest soldiers on the planet drive into a war zone in a vehicle that is, without a doubt, pink? It's a paradox that has become legendary, and we're about to unravel the whole thing.
So let me introduce you to the Series 2A Land Rover. Its official, boring name was the Truck General Service 3/4 ton. But to everyone else, it was the Pink Panther or just the Pinky. And believe me, this was no fashion statement. This was a purpose-built weapon for the British Special Air Service, the SAS.
Now, to really understand this vehicle, you first have to understand the operators who drove it. We're talking about the men of the SAS.
And look, that isn't an exaggeration. The SAS are pretty much the gold standard for special forces. Their selection process is brutal, their training is the stuff of legend, and their operations are famous in military history. So when these guys choose a piece of equipment, you better believe there's a very, very good reason for it.
And their missions in the desert? Some of the most demanding you can possibly imagine. They were basically following in the footsteps of their World War II ancestors, the Long-Range Desert Group. SAS teams had to operate completely on their own for weeks, sometimes even months at a time. They were hunters, moving deep into hostile territory to gather intel and just cause chaos.
To pull that off, they needed a special kind of vehicle. So they didn't just go out and buy a Land Rover, they set out to create a true desert predator. And it all started with a pretty specific order.
Back in 1968, the British Ministry of Defense put in an order for exactly 72 long-wheelbase Land Rovers. This wasn't some mass-produced army truck. It was a small, bespoke fleet built for a very specific job.
Every single one of those 72 vehicles went to a company called Marshalls of Cambridge to be completely rebuilt. They were stripped of everything non-essential: doors, roof, windscreen, all of it, just to save weight. The chassis and suspension were seriously beefed up to handle the punishing terrain. And then came the mission-critical stuff.
With a whopping 100 gallons of fuel on board, these Pinkies could travel over 1,000 miles without needing a resupply. I mean, think about that. That's like driving from London all the way to Rome without ever stopping for gas. This incredible range was the whole key to their ability to stay independent deep inside enemy territory for so long.
And they were armed to the teeth. Seriously. We're talking multiple machine guns, anti-tank weapons, rifles, grenades, smoke launchers, literally everything a three-man team needed to fight its way in and, more importantly, fight its way out. They were stripped down, agile, long-range gun trucks. And yeah, they were pick.
So we're back to that central question. Why? Why pink? Well, the answer is this fascinating mix of battlefield legend and just plain old hard science.
Okay, so the story you'll always hear is about a crashed plane. The legend says a plane was painted this super vibrant pink to make it really easy to spot if it went down. But wouldn't you know it, when it did crash in the desert, rescuers couldn't find it for ages. The pink had just vanished against the sand. It's a great story, and it does have a little bit of truth to it.
But the real reason is a bit more complex, and it has everything to do with the physics of light out in the desert.
So here's the crucial thing to understand. Your traditional green or brown army camo, it's actually terrible in the desert. Against a backdrop of sand and rock, it just creates this dark, solid shape that's really easy to spot. Pink, on the other hand, does something amazing. At dawn and dusk, which are the key times for any kind of military movement, it pretty much disappears into the background haze. It's all about how light behaves. You've got this huge amount of dust and tiny particles in the desert air, and it scatters the sunlight. This scattering effect creates a kind of hazy, often pinkish or reddish glow, especially on the horizon. The specific shade they picked for these Land Rovers was designed to perfectly mimic that atmospheric haze, making the vehicle just blend right in. And hey, this isn't just theory. SAS veteran Chris Ryan, a guy who actually served in the regiment during that time, confirmed how well it worked. He said that when you're standing right next to it, the color looks completely wrong. But once you're on the ground, especially in those rocky, red-hued deserts of the Middle East, they just vanished.
The Pink Panther's totally counterintuitive camouflage was so successful that it carved out its own unique place in military history.
These vehicles served for over 20 years.
all the way from the late 1960s through the 80s. They saw action all over the Middle East and Africa, basically anywhere the SAS needed a long-range desert patrol vehicle. It wasn't until the first Gulf War in 1991 that they were finally replaced by newer, more conventional sand-colored Land Rovers.
Their service life was hard, and most of the original 72 vehicles just didn't survive. Today, it's estimated that only about 20 of the originals even exist, which makes them incredibly rare and highly sought-after pieces of military history.
And the legend of that color just lived on. SAST veteran Chris Ryan tells this great story about how even after the new, tan-colored Land Rovers came in, everyone in the regiment still called them Pinkies. And when the younger troopers would ask why, the old-timers would just tell them to go read their history.
In the end, the story of the Pink Panther is so much more than just a weird color choice. It's his perfect lesson in military innovation, and it's a real testament to the SAS mindset, that sometimes the greatest advantage you can have comes from seeing the world just a little bit differently, and understanding that the best disguise is the one that's hiding in plain sight.